I saw a video recently that made me slightly perturbed, you could say, of some British guy like explaining the decline of football or aka soccer in Australia. But he missed some very important things, and I want to indirectly respond to it now without specifically mentioning the video to explain what actually happened there. So, if you know anything about the football, the soccer, God, the name Socceroos is such a fucking awful name. I can't fuck whoever came up with that. I hate them. Australia actually had a very good international team, and now they fucking suck. Now they're terrible. They didn't just have a good international team. There was a good 15, 20, 30 players who played at the top level all around the world in Europe. And now they suck fucking ass. And there's a very specific reason for that foreigners, and honestly most Australians probably wouldn't be able to cover. The complete and total decline of the local, the grassroots clubs in Australia for a very specific reason. Because Australia's so-called soccer used to be completely propped up by immigrant teams. So you had, for example, Melbourne Knights used to be called Melbourne Croatia. That's where Mark Viduka came from. Marconi was an Italian team. I believe Harry Kewell came from there. There's other teams too, Heidelberg was a Greek team. South Melbourne as well was a Greek team. These are some of the top teams in the country in the old league, which is the National Soccer League called the NSL. These teams had 50 plus years of history. They had very, very well developed grassroots support, grassroots youth systems, and they produced a lot of decent players, some of which went on to play for the national team and in Europe. But the league that they played in was very weird because Australian sports is very similar to American sports in that for some reason all the top leagues need to have a very set structure where there's no promotional relegation, and instead of the league winner winning the league, there's a tournament at the end of the season all the time. I don't know why we're obsessed with that, but we do it. But still, the NSL, it was like a league of mostly clubs that had a lot of history. It had the historic, the best clubs of each state in it, with a couple of new clubs that were created in order to bring states where football is not very popular into the league. But still, it was possible for teams, actual real teams, to get into the league, just not through promotion. Rather, if they were popular enough on a state level and perform well enough, they could be promoted to the league. It was a bad system, but it was significantly better than what we have now. And then in 2004, 2005, some of the expansion teams of the NSL, not the historic teams, they were all expansion teams that had been created within the last 5 to 10 years. They left the NSL to form their own league called the A-League with a bunch of completely new teams that are really not even clubs anymore. They're not clubs with a grassroots support like the immigrant team used to have. Nothing like that. Now they're constructed sports franchises, like a fucking NFL team or an NBA team or something. They're not teams with any history. They're not teams that have a strong network in their local community from which they can bring in youth players and stuff with a ton of enthusiasm for them. They're these fucking commercial constructs. If you look at the present list of A-League teams, the oldest club was founded in 1995. Oh, sorry, no, the Brisbane Roar was founded in 1957. They're the only actual team with a little bit of history. The second oldest was founded in 1995. No, there's only one club in the A-League that has existed for more than 22 years. So now we have this system in Australia where you have the top league is this very closed system, even more so than before, significantly more so. So they took an already bad system where the top league was relatively difficult to get into, but it was still nonetheless made up of important clubs with very well-formed grassroots support and youth networks. And they replaced this with a closed, American-style franchise league, where each club is just sort of there to cater to a specific market for the sake of the league, rather than a club that just happens to be participating in a league. You know what I mean? So rather than inviting the established clubs, for example, South Melbourne FC, they create their own fucking teams, the Melbourne Victory, the Melbourne City, which is a fucking offshoot club of Manchester City. What a fucking joke. Sydney FC instead of Marconi, for example. And they leave out all of the historic clubs that produce this golden generation of players that almost beat Italy in the World Cup and that did very important things across Europe, players like Viduka, Cahill, Kewell, Schwarzer, these types of guys. Actually, no, I don't think Schwarzer came from an Australian team, did he? No, Schwarzer was from fucking Marconi. That's another. So yeah, that's another good example. This like sort of golden generation of Australian players who, I mean, they weren't that great, but they were on the level of like the second tier South American clubs, the second tier European. I mean, the second tier South American national teams, the second tier European national teams, like Uruguay, for example. Teams like Sweden, they were on the level of those teams. Teams that aren't particularly great, but that on a good day can beat the best national teams. Those sorts of teams. And now they're just fucking garbage. And the reason for that is, as I said, like this sort of corporatization of the Australian Football League and the Australian football system, where the historic clubs now have no chance of ever competing above the state level outside of cup competitions because the National League is like a fucking corporate joke now. So the grassroots game has been completely dismantled. It doesn't exist anymore, basically. And that's why it fucking sucks now. That's why Australia went from having like an entire team of players who played at the top level in Europe to a team where like the best players can't even make the bench of a Premier League team anymore. So yeah, that's the real reason for it.